Hi, it's Frank. I'm once again going to be working with chords today. I'm going to be talking specifically about using major triads and inversions. So as we talked about in the last couple of videos, the idea of a major chord is that we have a triad shape, 3 notes. And in the case of a C major scale, which we're going to work with again today, those notes are going to be built off of the root, 3rd, and 5th of that scale. So recall that when we worked with C major, we had E right after that as our 3rd, and then G as our 5th. And that's because of their relationship in the key of C. If we go up the scale, the first note is C, we skip D to get to E, skip F to get to G. Root, 3rd, 5th. 5th played here is the same as the open 3rd string. So I wanted to go ahead and mention right up front, there's a PDF linked in the description for this video. It can put right in front of you some of the concepts that I'm talking about, both in notation and tab. Sometimes that's helpful when you're going over something that's a little new, if you're trying to understand shapes on guitar especially. Seeing them, visualizing them is very helpful, and having them in this case in a PDF, either as notation or tab, can be really great if you're trying to make sure you understand exactly what it is I'm talking about as I move through the video. So with the major shape, we're going to start with what we did last time. In this case, since we started with a C major scale, we're going to look at the C chord. Recall that the 3 notes that make up that triad are the root C, the note E, which is the 3rd, G is the 5th. So the idea with an inversion is we take the lowest note and move it up an octave. This C, in other words, that's on the 3rd fret of the 5th string, moves to the 1st fret of the 2nd string. Doing that now puts E on the bottom of the chord, meaning it's the lowest note. In that case, you have a chord that sounds like E, open G, C on top. That's called the first inversion, because that's the first way you can invert the chord, by taking the root and moving it up an octave. From there, if I take the lowest note E and move that up an octave, instead of the 4th string, 2nd fret, 1st string, open, then what I get is G on the bottom, C after that, and then 1st string open. So there, once again, I have an inversion, specifically the 2nd inversion. So if I were to do that a 3rd time and just take the triad and then take the lowest note G and throw it up an octave, I would actually wind up with the same thing I started with, an octave higher. That is to say, the next note is C, of course, here instead of down here, and that could also be found on the 5th fret of the 3rd string. Meaning the last shape, if I wanted to do the octave of what I started with, would look like this, C, E, G. This is a ways up the neck, as you can see. It involves moving between the 5th and the 3rd fret. If you're not already comfortable with that, this is a great way to start stretching out. And once again, this shape is actually present on that PDF that you can find linked to in the description for the video. The main thing, though, is to take away from this that a triad can have up to 2 different inversions. So you have the root position, the first inversion, and then the 2nd inversion. You want to continue up to the octave, that's where you have that shape. So in every one of those cases, though, it's the same 3 notes. They're simply being manipulated by taking the lowest note and moving it up higher. And every time I do that, I come up with a new shape, and we give those names like root, 1st inversion, 2nd inversion. So now I want to go to the next chord that we discovered was a major chord, a diatonic major chord in C, in the last set of videos. Recall that in a C major scale, the 1st note, the 4th note, which happens to be F, and the 5th note are both going to also yield major triads. So in addition to C, F and G are also going to be major triads. F is found here most easily on the 3rd fret of the 4th string. But for my purposes, because I want to take the same kind of shape that I use for C and play it elsewhere, meaning I want to cover all those inversions easily, I'm going to locate it on the 8th fret of the 5th string. I could have gotten to that by saying C, D, D, E, E, F, or I could just poke around the 5th string until I found a note that had the same pitch as the one down here on the 4th string. Either way works at this point. You just want to make sure you're starting on F for this. The other thing I'm going to do is remember that when I did the C chord, I used an open string, and an open string is like playing a note that's on this side of the nut. If I take my pinky and put it on C, then go to E with my ring finger, I can imagine my first finger is 2 frets away and 1 string higher from my ring finger on the next string. If I do that same thing here, starting on F, go up a major 3rd, and remember we talked about the shape in the last video, 1 fret apart, 1 string higher, and I'm playing a major 3rd, so I know it's a major triad I'm starting with. From there, I move up a minor 3rd from my ring finger to 1st finger. That gives me the notes F, A, C. Okay, those 3 notes are the notes we found and identified in the last video. I'm just reminding you of that. The main reason I want to locate them here, though, is so now I know that I have to take this F note and throw it up an octave from the 8th fret of the 5th string to the 6th fret of the 2nd string. By doing that, I now can have a chord that's in first position, first inversion. A, C, F. Notice this shape here spans across the 4th, 3rd, and 2nd string. If I then take the lowest note A and move it up an octave from the 7th fret of the 4th string to the 5th fret of the 1st string, I have a shape which gives me the 2nd inversion of an F chord. C, F, A. I'm using what's called a mini bar shape to cover the first 3 strings when I play that, but I could just as easily use these first 3 fingers like this. And by doing that, some of you may recognize this as the same shape we use for a first position or open position D as in dog major chord. Turns out whenever you play that chord, even though you're using the open 4th string quite often, you're actually playing the shape of a 2nd inversion D major chord. So by moving it up to here, I'm making it an F chord. And I know that because of the location of the root, which is going to live on the 2nd string when I use these first 3 strings and this shape. So again, this is where you start associating shapes with what the root name is, so that way you can move them around more easily. When it's down here, D is the root because my second finger, ring finger happens to be on the note D on the 2nd string. But when it moves up here, my ring finger is now on the note F. So that's what reminds me. This is an F chord, but it happens to be in the 2nd inversion. So once again, we had F, A, C, A, C, F, C, F, A. If I wanted to continue that up to the next available shape, it would look like that. This here happens to be the shape you would find on the first 3 strings if you were looking to play root position an octave higher. So instead of starting on the 8th fret of the 5th string, the F that I started with was actually on the 10th fret of the 3rd string. For now though, just having the ability to know that I've got 3 different shapes available for an F chord beginning on the 5th string. F, A, C, root position, A, C, F, first inversion, C, F, A, 2nd inversion is really helpful because I've already expanded some territory in terms of moving between the 5th and 1st string, and I've moved myself up the neck. Now the cool thing here is, since the next chord is G major that we're going to work with, all we have to do is remember, using intervals, that G is only 1 step, 2 frets higher than F. So everything I just did beginning on that 8th fret, I can just take that and move everything up toward the sound hole in my case, 2 frets. So that tells me if that's F, that's got to be G, because G is a step 2 frets away from F. So if I start here with G, I have to go up a major 3rd. That's going to give me the note B as in boy. Again, think the musical alphabet. If you're going A, B, C, D, E, F, G, you start again on A, but in this case we skip it because we want to go to the note that's a 3rd after that. G, A, B. So that's B. This shape is a major shape, this G to B shape, just like it was for F, just like it was for C. So that tells me this triad is going to be major. G, B, and D as in dog. In this case, D is located on the 7th fret of the 3rd string, and that's a minor 3rd away from the B. This is my G major triad in root position. Just going through similar shapes to what I did a moment ago with F, I know that this shape gives me the 1st inversion. B as in boy, D as in dog with the G 1 octave higher. I also know then that if I do this, I'm playing the 2nd inversion of a G major chord. D as in dog is on the bottom, G is right above it, and then B as in boy is at the top. I once again could take that even higher into a root position that's an octave higher, but for our purposes what we really want to remember more than anything is just the G, B, D as in dog, B, D as in dog, G, B as in dog, G, B. Alright, 3 different shapes to memorize that allow us then to move a major chord along those strings any place we want. All we do is just change the name. All right, so that was, once again, just working with the major triads, moving them into, in this case, C, F, and G positions. And once again, this is all spelled out in that PDF that's linked in the description. So having that in front of you could be really helpful when you're trying to actually make heads or tails of this if I happen to go by it a little bit too fast. Next video, we'll go ahead and talk about minor chords and diminished chords using the same idea of taking shapes and just moving them up the neck. Take care.